Alright, so this video has been in the making for a very, 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 very long time. Obviously, most people that clicked on this probably saw the ArchTerra announcement video, but if you haven't, essentially it's a massive project that I'm working on. And this video is kind of like an introduction to it that's more in-depth than the announcement was. And for it, I'm be using a real-life Tyrannosaurus Rex, dropping it into the first biome. Well, it's a couple biomes, but mainly one biome, the most fleshed out one currently, and seeing how well the Rex would do here. I will be having speculative evolutions of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and those speculative evolutions will actually become permanent creatures in ArchTerra. The normal T-Rex will not, though. Essentially, this is going to be like my video with the Jurassic Rexes in Hell Creek. I'm not going to be too focused on power scaling here, because frankly, if I was, it wouldn't go very well for the T-Rex. ArchTerra is kind of like Monster Hunter. You can go off it for like a realistic lens, and it's kind of like a normal world. But if you look at the power scaling, what these animals can do, like in the game for Monster Hunter, in lore for this, they're definitely not normal animals. So for this, I'm going to be looking at them more as like normal animals, while still bringing up some of the stuff they can do to make it more fair for the T-Rex. Because trust me, it's going to need it. But before I even get into it, I should probably lay down the basics of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. For this, I'm going to go off what I personally think is the most consistent for a real-life Tyrannosaurus Rex in terms of weight. And that is around 9 tons for an adult. Yes, some individuals like Sue and Scotty potentially got to 11 tons, and other individuals like Goliath and Cope potentially got to 12 or maybe even 13. But for most specimens, the most consistent weights I see are between 9 and 10 tons, with some being closer to 8. And this is consistent when compared to similar sized theropods, at least similar size in terms of length and height. So no, not every T-Rex here is going to be the size of Sue. There will be a very large population of them though. As for other statistics of the T-Rex, it couldn't really run that well. A Tyrannosaurus Rex honestly probably didn't even run once it reached adulthood. It maybe could have fast walked decently fast enough to keep up with some people, but not like breaking any records. At the size the T-Rex was at, being able to move fast on 2 legs at all is almost a miracle on a biological level. Doing it in a full-on sprint would be near impossible. Like the way that Rexy runs in the first Jurassic Park film would likely break a real-life T-Rex's legs, especially running through a tree. That's why the RL Rexes are traditionally, in most newer stuff, shown walking or being kind of stealthy. This is also kind of what backs them being stealth predators, as well as them having padded feet. So Rexes were a lot more crocodile or tiger and a lot less cheetah or lion. Tyrannosaurus Rex also had very good vision and could see pretty well at nighttime as well. They were hunters. It's kind of unknown exactly how they hunted, per se. Most stuff suggests that they were pretty solitary and very territorial, as they were... It's pretty clear from fossils that they fought each other a lot over territory, with face bites being extremely common on Tyrannosaurus Rex, and other injuries inflicted by Tyrannosaurus Rex teeth being pretty much everywhere you look, and the vast majority of the fossils we have of them. Young Tyrannosaurus Rex was a lot faster and a lot more like what you'd imagine a Nanotyrannus would be like. So they hunted completely different than the adult version. They may have occasionally been in pairs, most likely mating pairs. I don't know if there's any evidence to really fully support that, but it is technically possible that that might have been a thing they did. So I'll consider it here. So you might have a couple family units of Tyrannosaurus Rex, maybe 2 adults and a couple offspring, but they wouldn't stick together forever. That's just not how a Tyrannosaurus Rex likely operated. Tyrannosaurus Rex did not roar in real life. I know some people might be a little surprised by that. They literally couldn't. They most likely didn't have the biological parts to do that. So Rexy's roar is something scientifically not really possible for a giant reptile. It's pretty much a mammal-only thing, for the most part. Also, Tyrannosaurus Rex had probably one of, if not the best sense of smell of any land predator ever. So, there's that too. So, with all that said, where is the Tyrannosaurus Rex going to just pop on in at? Well, they're going to pop up through time-space distortions, rifts, basically. These are something that is actually canon to ArchTerra, so it's not unnatural for things to just wander in from different realities. So they just kind of walk on in through a bunch of portals. The population will be extremely large. We'll say potentially a couple million, which makes sense given that they're all going to be in the Blazewood Forest, which is, as you can see from this map, the little dots, little square at the other side is the real-life Amazonian rainforest. A pretty big place. If you didn't watch the introduction to ArchTerra, it's a planet that makes One Piece's planet look relatively small by comparison. So, yeah, it's this, like, average forests are larger than continents pretty consistently. And this is only a part of the Blazewood Forest, not the full thing. The Blazewood Forest is also not fully just forest. There is other biomes mixed in. And there's this underground part, as you can see from this map. But the T-Rex is most likely going to stick in the forested areas because that's where it would probably prefer, or by coastal areas as well. So I'll be breaking this down into a couple categories for how well the Tyrannosaurus Rex will do here. Stuff like habitat, food, competition, and predators. The reason I'm separating competition and predators is because there's some animals here that will act more as direct competition for food, and there's other animals that might view Tyrannosaurus Rex as a potential prey option itself, which obviously isn't good for the Tyrannosaurus Rex. So with all that said, I'll start out with habitat, and for the majority of the Blazewood Forest, it's pretty fine for a T-Rex. Most of it is relatively tropical to subtropical, with trees somewhat similar to earth trees. And, I mean, some of these trees are significantly larger than any plant on Earth has ever been, but that's not really too much of a problem for a T-Rex. Some denser parts of the forest would be potentially too large for a T-Rex to wander into. I mean too thick for a T-Rex to wander into. But no other large predators really go there anyway, so it wouldn't be too... It's not something that would really matter for the actual Rex, because most of the prey in there isn't prey that it would actively want to be hunting anyway. Swamps are pretty common throughout the forest, little areas that are kind of like wetlands. There's also wetlands outside of the forest that a Tyrannosaurus Rex could potentially venture to. The mountainous areas aren't somewhere a T-Rex would really want to go, but there are forests leading up some of the mountains that would technically be somewhat decent habitat for a Rex. Just the upper parts of the large mountain ranges would be a pretty big problem for a T-Rex, not just due to what's up there, but also just due to that not being ideal terrain for a Tyrannosaurus Rex. A lot of the coastal areas would have worked fine for Tyrannosaurus Rex. They lived in areas near relatively beach-like places, and part of their diet is believed to have been sea turtles and stuff along those lines, so it would be fine. There are predators and coastal caves that hold other animals that probably wouldn't be great for a T-Rex to encounter, but it could still potentially survive in a coastal area. And in places like the wastelands and deserts that are outside the forest, not exactly ideal terrain for a T-Rex, but it's possible one could survive out there if it could withstand all the other things that live out there and actively find prey sources. So overall, it's not the best place for a T-Rex to live, but most of it is places where a real-life Tyrannosaurus Rex would be just kind of fine in. Not too different from Hell Creek in a lot of areas. So, in terms of habitat, it actually gets probably like an 8.5, not counting all the other animals that live there. Now moving to potential food sources. I'm not going to be listing off every single animal that lives in this part of ArchTerra because this video would be like 3 hours long. Just off a single biome. There's already several hundred animals added to it already, so I can't go over everything. Just know there are other factors that aren't being ignored, just not mentioned here for the T-Rex's survival. They will still play a part in how I score the Rex, but animals I ignore here might pop up in other videos where I'm talking about either just ArchTerra itself, or how other animals from other things would deal with the other animals that I haven't mentioned here, especially if they're more relevant to that scenario. I'm going off animals that are the most relevant to the Tyrannosaurus Rex's survival here, both as prey, competition, and also predators. So, stuff like giant carnivorous plants that aren't big enough to actually do much to a Rex aren't going to be mentioned. Things like small theropods that are too fast to be prey, but too little to matter as competition, and hunt specialized Ways that don't actually affect the food sources that T-Rex goes for also won't be mentioned, and just animals that T-Rex probably won't encounter, like Mega Beast and dragons, aren't going to be mentioned, because Mega Beast, there's no point even considering them any of the three categories, because a T-Rex would be so meaningless in comparison to them that it wouldn't even matter to the thing. Most things in ArchTerra aren't comparable to Mega Beast, and even less things are comparable to the dragons, which are like essentially gods. So if a Rex encounters a dragon, the odds are it, like most normal animals in ArchTerra, isn't surviving. Thankfully, they're very rare, and they don't just go out of their way to nuke little theropods for no reason, so the odds of it ever encountering one are quite rare. The first thing the Rexes are probably going to do upon arriving in ArchTerra for both the juveniles and adults is look for prey similar to what they had in somewhere like the Hell Creek Formation or other habitats that they inhabited. And there are actually animals from the Hell Creek Formation in ArchTerra, due to time rifts, from the portal to the What If video with the Jurassic Rexes in ArchTerra. These animals aren't the same animals, they're the evolutions, with altered names and sizes, of course, to make it less, to show that they've been in ArchTerra for at least a pretty decent while and became a little bit different than they were at the end of that video, a little more specialized at what they became. Now, if you remember that video, yeah, a lot of these aren't things that a T-Rex is going to really want to go after, but they are potential prey items. So I'll go ahead and discuss them. Starting off with Edmontosaurus rex, it is significantly larger than the non-Rex variant from real life. Weighing between 9 to 20 metric tons and being up to 57 feet long, with sharp dew claw-like spikes and strange coloring on them, they are definitely massive hadrosaurs. Now, for smaller 9-ton individuals or younger or older individuals that are getting to the point where they can't really fight properly, the risk of getting killed by Tyrannosaurus rex is about as high as it would be getting killed by the larger R-Rex or the even larger K-Rex, which actually hunts the adult individuals. That should be some foreshadowing for how that's going to turn out when it meets the T-Rex. But I don't see them being a very good food source for a Rex to continuously go back to, largely because the adults are more than large enough to mess an adult T-Rex up pretty bad. These things are nearing small sauropod size, so yeah, a T-Rex probably is going to steer clear. And they also travel in large herds and are definitely protective of the young and the old. So yeah, it's not going to be a great food source for a Rex to continuously rely on, because the odds of getting ran off like a bunch of Cape Buffalo versus a lion are very high. Even less viable as a food source is Ankylosaurus titanus. At up to 29 metric tons and around 57 feet long, yeah, no, a normal Ankylosaurus at significantly smaller sizes is still a threat to Tyrannosaurus rex in real life. These behemoths are pretty much a walking death sentence to any Rex that tries to fight them, especially with the raised tails that make hitting a Rex in the face very likely. Or high up, hitting like the pelvis and just completely shattering the T-Rex's little wishbone into millions of pieces. So yeah, no, a T-Rex would probably avoid these tanks altogether. And the same goes for Torosaurus morus, which is just a much larger Torosaurus, pretty much, with some armor on the back. A slightly altered, kind of spiky frill, and slightly different horns. Overall, it's still just a mega ceratopsian and not something that a Rex would really challenge in real life, even at smaller sizes, so probably no. One sort of viable prey option is the Triceratops' evolution, with Triceratops miles, as its size is roughly the same as the real life variant. And their skulls and stuff have been altered, of course, their frill now being significantly stranger in comparison to other ceratopsians. Maybe a T-Rex could take one down in a similar fashion to how it would a real-life Triceratops, but it would still be a struggle, and they are kind of adapted to take on T-Rex-like animals already. Plus, real-life Triceratops was already very rarely hunted by Tyrannosaurus rex, and usually one fights between them, so it's still not a very viable prey option. Meaning all familiar prey, at least familiar like from the real world, just evolved differently, is kind of out the window. It also kind of goes without saying, but most sauropods are also out the window, because a lot of sauropods in ArchTerra are actually larger than real life sauropods could get. So If a Rex couldn't already hunt some of the mid-sized sauropods in real life, it isn't really touching something larger than the largest possible in real life. Especially some that have elemental powers and other kind of unfair advantages over a Rex. Following the trend of ceratopsians, we have Seraphonzoa, around 10.5 metric tons with very strong armor, iron-infused spikes, large horns and tusk, and fairly fast speeds for its size. These things live typically on either the plains or the border between the plains and the forest. If a Rex was able to knock one over, it could pretty easily kill one. These are relatively small in comparison to some of the other ceratopsians we have coming up and have already seen. But in a general confrontation, the very protective armor, huge horns and tusks, and speed of this thing, plus the fact it's T-Rex sized already, kind of makes it unfair. So a Rex also wouldn't hunt these things often unless it's a young individual and they have the jump on it and manage to knock it over. Two prey options a T-Rex is never going to be able to hunt here is the Cornageraxsaurus and the Cornageraxsaurus Rex. Both of these two are absolutely massive ceratopsians that dwarf a T-Rex by an almost kaiju-like level of size. So, yeah, no, the T-Rex would completely avoid both of these species and never even attempt to hunt one. At least not unless it evolves to be at least similar sizes to it. Even the very large Kaisersaurus Rex, one of the apex predators of the forest in most areas, and a creature somewhat similar to a Tyrannosaurus Rex, just significantly larger, rarely attempts to hunt either of these two. A far more viable prey option is Proleoborosaurus, which is still around Rex sized at 40 feet long and weighing around 17,000 pounds. I mean, they're still massive animals, but they aren't as protected as most of the ceratopsians. They're kind of mishmash of hadrosaur, stegosaur, and ankylosaur with a large, kind of sharp club, similar in shape to like a diamond almost. Lots of plates on the back, similar to the stegosaurus, and a head kind of similar to a hadrosaur, but with a small frill. They are still something that could threaten a Rex, and they do travel in herds, much like Edmontosaurus Rex, but due to their relatively smaller size and many weak points a Rex could exploit due to their strange choice in armor, it is possible that a Rex could survive off of these for the most part. Now, Rexes are still going to sometimes get their jaws knocked off or get bones broken completely by these things. So it's not a perfect prey source, but it's at least a viable one. For a list of pretty viable prey options a Rex could hunt, we have Quittertusk. They live typically in shallow waters or near coastlines, as well as near lakes. A Rex could hunt these pretty easily if they get close. The only problem is they have to venture to the water, and these things do have herds and are relatively faster than a Rex in a full-on run. But if a Rex gets a good bite on one, it could easily eat one. Acuminas, which are a lot larger than the prior prey animal I just mentioned, and sometimes actually live with them, getting up to 12 metric tons on average. A Rex would certainly struggle in a full-on fight against one, but at least with this animal, there's a chance a Rex could win just off getting a good bite. Of course, there are times where it's going to get messed up, but it's more likely they're taking this down than a 20-ton hadrosaur from hell. Bunkarrames, which are very small ceratopsians at only around 1 metric ton, they can easily be killed by a Rex if a Rex managed to get close to one, usually through stealth. And they are one of the more viable prey options a Rex could hunt. Now, they are faster than the Rex, so unless the Rex is super stealthy, they will probably escape one, but since Rexes are ambush/stealth hunters, they have a good shot at getting a lot of their food from small herbivores like this. And the same goes for its very close relative, the Wackarrami. Also small, these do have a clubbed tail and a far more protective amount of armor as well as a frill, but again, just due to the size, a Rex has a good shot at killing one. Though, unlike their close cousins, they can actually deal damage to a Rex if they needed to. But they're also a little slower, so it kind of balances itself out. So these two are very viable prey options, as well as the last two I mentioned. A not very viable prey option is the 16 actually 16 plus metric ton on average. Cerosantonatus, not really something a Rex can consistently hunt. These things have massive horns, and despite being kind of like Edmontosaurus was in real life, the sheer size of these things plus the massive horn make a Rex hunting one consistently not very likely. Though I could see it occasionally ending with a Rex eating one. So they're pseudo-viable as a prey option. But still not something I'd bet a Rex would hunt, at least not regularly. At nighttime, a Rex will have the opportunity to maybe attack a night grazer, which they could kill just due to night grazers' relatively smaller size at only around 7 metric tons on average. But these things can breathe out pitch black smog that can damage a Rex's respiratory system, as it is slightly venomous, and their back spines have a venom very similar to stonefish, so biting the wrong spot could result in a Rex's death outright. But if they manage to avoid that and catch the much faster nocturnal animal with actually better night vision and smell than a T-Rex has, there is a chance they could hunt those during the nighttime. But it's still not something I bet they'd be eating often, just due to these things having better senses than a Rex, and Rexes having to purposely avoid certain areas to not instantly die trying. Now, Friluros, which are relatively smaller than most hadrosaurs that we've seen thus far, at only around 40 feet long and 11 feet at the hip at most, are a far more viable prey option. Outside the massive, frills on their head, they really don't have much to defend themselves with other than their size, which isn't too impressive compared to a T-Rex. Though they do travel in packs, it'd be like hunting hadrosaurs in real life. Though a lot bigger than Edmontosaurus typically would have been in real life in terms of sheer weight. Typically, there are specimens of Edmontosaurus that dwarf the average Friluros, but there are Friluros individuals that would dwarf them as well. Rex would have a little more trouble hunting these than they did with the actual Edmontosaurus in real life, and again would still probably target sick, old, or young individuals. But these are a very viable prey option for a large Tyrannosaurus Rex to hunt, and would make up probably a decent amount of their diet, as there is a lot of meat on these things. Also, as I'm sure some people have noticed, they definitely take inspiration from a certain creature from Monster Hunter. Aquavagulls are also technically a viable food source for a Rex, but since they live predominantly in shallow waters and tend to prefer being in water for most of the day and even night, the odds of a Rex sneaking up on one are relatively bad, and these things can swim pretty fast, so Rex catching up to one at all is also not going to be easy. Plus, they can spray pink mist from their mouth and actually their crest as well, which can and will cause extreme dizziness and nausea to any predator that inhales it. So they're not super viable, but they are something a Rex could realistically beat and kill in a fight and then continue to devour it. But the odds of them hunting these regularly are again quite low. There's also a multitude of kind of hippo-like animals in ArchTerra. The Rex could hunt and kill a lot of these, but would also get smoked by a lot of them as well. So we'll consider them as a whole group pseudo-viable prey. Some of them would smoke a Rex, some would get smoked by a Rex, but would still be hard to actually get to as they travel in massive packs and riverways. Plus, the rivers have some of the largest, most dangerous predators in ArchTerra's forest, including some that a Rex would definitely get absolutely curb stomped by, so it's not like they're going to spend too much time by water when they aren't, in need of drink or actively desperate for food. There's also the Mega Therizinosaurus-like animal called just simply referred to as branch breakers. Unlike the real-life Therizinosaurus, these claws can and will cut directly through a Rex and can cut trees in half. Plus, these guys are 33 metric tons on average, some of them getting over 50, and on average being around 60 to 70 feet long. So, yeah, no, a Rex isn't beating one of these in a fight, even with these things being solitary. Plus, their bills are extremely hard, and they have a sharp tongue that acts as a spear, very similar to a woodpecker's. So, yeah, no, a Rex would avoid these things entirely, most likely intimidated by their more upright posture and sheer size. A Minosauro and Minibildra are both prey options that small Rexes would likely hunt pretty regularly. They're very small, only 30 pounds on average for both species. They're both actually technically sauropods, despite Minibildra looking more like a hadrosaur. And despite being sauropods, they also stay tiny. The only problem is these things live in very dense parts of the forest that are hard for large predators to get into. So small rexes would have little problem hunting them, but adult rexes would likely avoid them. That's also ignoring that a 30-pound animal for a rex is like not even like a pizza roll for an adult human, so like it's not really worth it. Voldelos, very similar to Ankylosaurus, is extremely armored. Unlike Ankylosaurus, they lack a tail club and tend to just sit down when attacked by large animals, which does work, but can also not work if the animal decides to not target the shell. These animals only really stay alive because they have a very high birth rate and have a very efficient way of storing their eggs to make sure all the young survive. They also start out as geovores, meaning the young aren't really out in the open. They're in caves eating rocks instead of eating plants out in the wild. That's really the only reason their species isn't extinct, because these things get messed up by predators in ArchTerra quite a bit, despite being a walking 10-ton tank. So a rex, which is only around a ton lighter on average, and larger rexes being actually heavier, could likely knock one over, despite its very low to the ground posture, and just kill it. Our rexes already do this often, and our rexes aren't, I mean, they're definitely bigger than a T-Rex, but they aren't like so much bigger that it's insane. I mean, it kind of is, but they're not so much bigger that like you can't compare the two, I guess is what I'm trying to say. They're around the same height and length as a Jurassic Park Rex, while having a similar body bulk and raw weight to length and height ratio as a real life T-Rex is the best way I can describe them. A far more actually like successful Ankylosaur is the Cholart, potentially based off a certain character from a certain video game. These massive tanks are not only significantly larger than any real Ankylosaur, with a size more appropriate for a sauropod, and so much larger than a Rex that a Rex would probably just run off and ran into one, but they also have elemental powers, able to fire essentially a laser beam from their mouth that could cut a Rex in half pretty easily. Yeah, I'm not going to go into power scaling, but I can't ignore powers that the animals have in this verse. Now, most animals don't have these, but there are animals that do, and I can't just take that away from them just to make it more fair for the Rex. So yeah, a Rex would probably get sniped by these things if it tried to hunt one. Their mace-like tail could easily obliterate a Rex pretty handedly. And they have regeneration. So you could rip their limb off and it's going to regrow within a couple minutes at worst, and maybe a couple seconds at best. They also draw power directly from the sun through what is essentially biological solar panels on steroids. So yeah, hurting these things at all is near impossible, and a Rex wouldn't try it most likely. It would be most likely terrified of these things. But what if the Rex tried to go to a different biome? It could go to the wasteland, which has a lot of geovores and other things that a Rex wouldn't want to fight because most of them are very rocky. It could try going up to the mountains, where it might have to deal with massive herbivorous theropods that are not only larger but more aggressive and more dangerous than a Rex. It could potentially try going to the mountain tops, where it could potentially have to deal with the sauropod-sized mountain mammoths, pack hunters larger than itself, and a very territorial dragon in this territory that doesn't like predators, even ones as small as a Rex, being around her, and is one of the strongest dragons in the verse. So yeah, probably wouldn't be good for Rex to go there. It could go into the underground, though, where there are a lot of fungivores and animals that a Rex could potentially hunt, but there's also more dangerous predators down there that have something that a Rex is not used to, better senses than it. There's also still geovores and massive creatures near the crystal parts of the underground. That would be a massive problem for a Rex. Now, the swampy areas are technically viable for a Rex to go into. Most of the predators there outside crocodile-like animals aren't really big enough to challenge a Rex full on. Though there are herbivores there, that would be an issue to try to hunt. But the general parts of the swamps a Rex would have access to, parts that a Rex could reasonably migrate to without taking literal decades, aren't dangerous enough to really make it impossible for Rex to survive there, but it still wouldn't be an ideal habitat for a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it wouldn't be as specialized as the hunters already there for the prey that is available there. So with all that said, a Tyrannosaurus Rex has prey sources it can hunt in ArchTerra, but there's also a lot of stuff here that a Rex just simply wouldn't be able to even attempt hunting, which would be a problem for it. There also is a lot of stuff I didn't mention, turtles, small mammals, stuff like that, that smaller rexes would have access to hunting as well. And there is a lot more herbivores that weren't mentioned here, a lot of them strong enough to damage a rex, some of them actually more viable prey sources, but I'm just factoring them into here because I don't want this video to be longer than like an hour and 20 minutes at most. It probably is, though. It's already like, what, 30 minutes in, and I've only gone through one category. Regardless, though, yeah, rexes, they have food options, but they also have a lot of food options that don't work. So I'll give them a score of around 6 out of 10 at best. Now to competition, there are animals that will be in the category of predators instead of competition that are still technically competition. The reason I'm going to put them in predators of rexes is because they're a lot more likely to just eat a rex than the stuff in competition. And some of the stuff in competition could be still be argued in the predators section, especially a certain red theropod. But I'm still going to put them here because they aren't quite as insane as some of the other predators that are just, there's no point in comparison between them and a T-Rex. It's not a fair fight at all. Starting off with the R-Rex, or Rostratosaurus rex. This beaked super theropod is actually larger than any real-life Tyrannosaurus rex we know of, at 45 feet long and around usually 15 to 16 feet at the hip. This is an average individual. Some get larger, some are smaller. But generally, they are larger than Tyrannosaurus rex at around 15 metric tons. I don't know if I already mentioned that or not. They have massive beaks on their, as well as jaws similar to a T-Rex under the beaks, and large teeth similar to Tyrannosaurus rex, making their bite and peck extremely dangerous. They are a little more straightforward than a T-Rex, despite having senses, despite having senses very similar to Tyrannosaurus rex, and feet that are actually padded for stealth hunting. They don't tend to do stealth hunting. They tend to just run up and eat stuff. Kind of like, I don't know, kind of like wolves. They also will sometimes attack in packs, but are typically more solitary or in pairs. Though in rare cases, there have been packs of up to 20. It more so depends on the area and how social the R-Rexes are there, as well as what prey they're specialized in hunting. Some hunt sauropods, some hunt smaller stuff. Overall, R-Rexes are more effective than Tyrannosaurus rex in ArchTerra, and are definitely something a T-Rex is going to struggle to keep up with. Now, I still think T-Rex could survive if it was only this as competition here, but even this is pretty steep competition. And in a confrontation between the two, not only can R-Rex roar, which is going to scare the shit out of a T-Rex, but they're just as agile, can run, can jump. Yeah, I know I said I'm being realistic and not counting power scaling stuff, but this is still a fictional verse with very fictional animals that do very not possible in real life things. If stuff was realistic here, K-Rex wouldn't be able to stand, and R-Rex would barely be able to stand. I mean, there's literal dragon gods here. Like, I can't make it too realistic. Regardless, yeah, in a fight, R-Rex would smoke a T-Rex. It's faster, stronger, bigger, has more ways of attacking, and the feathers actually provide protection. And yes, I know feathers don't really work for theropods of that size in real life because they'd overheat. Just go with it. Yeah, R-Rex is kind of insane. Now, if this was more heavily restricted, realistic, R-Rex would just overheat and die. Or if it was in a colder area, it would be like a really oversized T-Rex fighting a normal T-Rex, in which R-Rex would still win. So if you want to go hyper-realistic, R-Rex would still probably win if it's a fair fight, as it's just so much bigger than a T-Rex. But yeah, in ArchTerra's rule set, real-life Tyrannosaurus rex versus R-Rex is not close at all. But they can avoid interacting with R-Rexes if they stay out of outskirts of the forest. R-Rexes tend to stay where K-Rexes aren't, as they don't go well together. So T-Rex, if it stays in areas with larger predators, can avoid smaller predators that are more so competition for it. Though it then puts itself in more predators' hunting grounds, but at least these predators are usually hunting stuff that they wouldn't even be able to hunt to begin with. So they have a slightly better chance of surviving areas like that than areas with R-Rex. Next, we have a nocturnal predator, Sicariasaurus venator, or Sicariasaurus venator. These are smaller than Rexes, but they travel in large packs, kind of like a very oversized raptor, getting around 6 tons on average. The good news about these things is they typically avoid predators because they don't like hunting predators. So confrontations between them and a Rex would be quite rare. I don't see either actively seeking the other out. Minotaurs are more or less out to hunt large prey or herbivores in their dens at nighttime. They aren't out to hunt large predators that are also out to hunt. Though they will kill a Rex if there's a lot of them. 4 or more would easily overpower a Rex, because that's like 24 tons of super raptor coming at you, but typically they're going to avoid large predators like Tyrannosaurus Rex. They already avoid R-Rex and K-Rex canonically, so a T-Rex is just that, but a little bit littler. Fluvosaurus daemon, aka what Jurassic Park 3 glazers think Snock is. These things are massive, like colossal Spinosaurids. And they have a beam attack. They fire a super hyper-pressurized beam of water with so much power, it can cut through several feet of tungsten in less than a second. Is that realistically possible? Biologically, no. Technically, yeah, you can get water that fast somehow, but biologically, no animal's going to do that. But again, this is a fictional person. They do fictional stuff, so yeah, no, these massive Spinosaurids also have broader jaws than a real-life Spinosaurid would, closer to like a crocodile than the very thin, almost gharial-like jaws that we see on actual Spinosaurids. Kind of like a mix of a gharial and a crane in a way. It's very strange. Regardless, these Spinosaurids are not something a Rex would want to fight. Thankfully, they live near rivers, and though very territorial, aren't going to run down a T-Rex just because it sees it. They'll probably roar, and that will scare the Rex away. And yes, they can roar. Most massive carnivores in the verse can. Is that realistic? Not really, because most dinosaurs couldn't roar in real life. But these technically aren't dinosaurs. They're just based on dinosaurs. So much like the Jurassic Park dinosaurs or the monsters of Monster Hunter, they don't have to really follow what they're based on 100%, as they're literally just not the same species. But yeah, in the water, T-Rex is not doing too hot against one, and on land they aren't either. These things are like 80 feet long and close in size to Kaisersaurus Rex. They're actually rivals to Kaisersaurus, which is like a T-Rex on super steroids, closer to something like Sharptooth or like I don't even know what other T-Rexes to compare it to. There aren't many T-Rexes that, I guess like maybe the Giganotosaurus from Journey to the Center of the Earth, the kaiju-sized one, or an Arc-Rex. Yeah, they're fighting stuff on that level of stupidly oversized Tyrannosaurus Rex. And they can move faster than a T-Rex despite the size. And they have massive claws, and they're extremely good swimmers, and their senses aren't exactly bad either. Plus the beam can reach out hundreds of feet, so yeah, no, a Rex isn't going to challenge one, and they most likely won't care about T-Rex because they hunt different prey. They don't like R-Rexes or K-Rexes in canon, but that's because R-Rexes are somewhat like they'll hunt fish in the water. They'll steal food from a Fluvosaurus. So they don't like that. T-Rex probably would too, but not as commonly. I don't think there's a lot of evidence to support T-Rex regularly ate fish. We know they ate turtles and sometimes crocodilians maybe. But R-Rexes will like literally go full fishermen sometimes. There's actually a species very closely related to them in ArchTerra in the wasteland parts that are full on basically Tyrannosaurus Spinosaurids in a way. So yeah, that's why there's a rivalry there. And then for K-Rexes, because a K-Rex is so big that you kind of have to get it out of your territory because it's like a walking mountain of death. And it's another apex predator, so obviously they don't like each other. It's like the Spinosaurus versus T-Rex debate if it was a lot closer. The best way to describe Fluvosaurus is me accidentally making the Thermoradiosaurus before Thermoradiosaurus was a thing. Yeah, no, T-Rex avoids them, and they probably don't interact much, but they definitely would be competition if a T-Rex was trying to go full aquatic. Next we have Barbatosaurus diminuus, which is actually more closely related to lizards in ArchTerra's lore than they are to theropods, despite being close to theropods in stance. These things are actually roughly the same size as a T-Rex at 9 tons on average. The difference is these things are completely different animals. They aren't stealthy hunters. These things tend to just run up and eat stuff. They attack prey that is around their size or smaller, and they'll actually use their spiked, bearded, essentially like meat tenderizer chin to just bash stuff to death. And they are pretty successful hunters despite being such a crude and primitive type of animal. But they definitely aren't beating a T-Rex in a 1v1 fight. The reason I say that is, unless you bring up power scaling arguments for ArchTerra, which I'm not going to do here, they're low-class carnivores in ArchTerra, and they're not really built for fighting things their own size. A T-Rex's jaws could easily damage one, and though these things have large claws that could definitely grapple and potentially kill a Rex, these things could win sometimes. Typically, just the difference in jaw strength is going to be what does it. These things are also less agile than a Rex, and kind of shaky in how they stand. Though they can move on all fours, they're not very fast. I said they run up to things. It's more like they kind of crawl up to things out of like burrows they make in the ground, like an ambush predator, but not like a stealthy one. Like they know something's coming. They tend to bully things smaller than them. That's how they hunt. They're not made to hunt something like a T-Rex. A T-Rex is typically going to just outbite them. And though they technically have a wider and on paper stronger jaw, the lack of neck muscle makes their bite actually fairly weak for their size. So yeah, I think T-Rex beats them typically in fights. So this is a type of competition that though they will sometimes hunt the same stuff, I see Rexes actually being the more successful of the two. Especially because canonically these things aren't the best in terms of successfulness in ArchTerra, and don't have a very large population outside wastelands. Some do live in the forest, which is why I'm even bringing them up, but they aren't very common. In the wastelands, their hunting strategy is more successful because they tend to live in very rocky places where it's easier for them to not be noticed despite not being very stealthy. In the forest, it's hard to blend in with the trees even when you're a fully brown creature because you're making so much noise moving 9 tons of muscle around. So yeah, T-Rex will probably win most fights. Monstrumsaurus brutum is the next competition. These are what I'd consider a Devil Joe-like creature in ArchTerra. There's 2 Devil Joe-like creatures in ArchTerra though. This is the smaller and weaker of the 2. Well, there's 2 that are made already. There'll probably be more eventually, but there's 2 that are currently part of the lore and canon. That being this, and then well, you'll see later when we get to Predators. But these things are a absolute nightmare for a T-Rex. Unlike Tyrannosaurus Rex, these things aren't very stealthy hunters, but they do hunt the same things. They can run just like an R-Rex can. They can actually climb and jump. And they have a breath attack, just like the Super Spinosaurus from earlier. Essentially, they will eat plant matter, not to digest it, but to store it in specialized organs and then superheat it into a very toxic ash that is mixed with venom. This venom, when hitting you through superheated ash, very similar to what you see when volcanoes erupt, causes an intense burning and itching sensation. Like someone just injected you with like poison oak and a bunch of Carolina Reaper juice, like directly into your like pain receptors. That's how it feels. Mixed with, again, superheated ash, similar to what you see in a volcano, that can kill stuff fairly easily. And all it has to do to refuel is eat another like couple branches, and voila, it's got another shot in it. And these things are spiky to all hell and back, have very strong jaws despite having exposed kind of almost goofy teeth. And I mean, they're just like, they're not something you want to deal with as a T-Rex. That's not something that you want to fight. They're like literally like a Devil Joe, just a little watered down to be slightly more realistic, but still not very realistic. And they're huge. They're bigger than R-Rex. At like 17 feet at the hip and weighing far more than any real-life theropod could ever get to, yeah, they destroy T-Rexes in fights, and they would be an absolute nightmare to deal with just due to how effective they are as hunters. I mean, they beat R-Rexes too, and R-Rexes are just faster, stronger, more agile, very similar in senses, and more effective for ArchTerra T-Rexes with more ways to attack, and they get beat up by these things. So when it comes to competition, these guys are even worse than R-Rexes for T-Rex, and they will be hunting pretty much everything T-Rex hunts, because these things hunt everything that isn't, a stronger thing than they are that can destroy them. But they hunt pretty much everything a T-Rex could hunt and more. There are a bunch of crocodilian-like animals within ArchTerra, as well as other animals that are close to crocodiles, but not quite. I will just kind of put a bunch of them here, because most of them either smoke a T-Rex or get smoked by a T-Rex. And there's no in-between, pretty much. So, they're all kind of decent competition for hunting what T-Rex hunts. Some of them are more terrestrial than others, so T-Rex is bound to encounter a couple of them eventually. Some of them are massive, near kaiju-sized. Other ones are pretty small, like closer to what you'd see in a real-life crocodile. So, it's like a 50-50. Regardless, yeah, there is crocodiles in ArchTerra. They're just as effective here as they are in real life, if not more so. We also have to talk about Caecusarilo, another nocturnal animal that a T-Rex may encounter. These are a lot smaller than a T-Rex, but just like with a certain other nocturnal animal I mentioned earlier, they have very toxic neurotoxin spines. So if a T-Rex bites one, good luck. And they have better senses than a T-Rex. The odds of ever encountering one are like 0. Their bite is pretty effective though, so there's that. And they will be hunting similar stuff to what T-Rex hunts for the most part, just attacking at nighttime. They are blind though. Just they have absurdly good hearing, echolocation, and all sorts of other, they have the best smell in ArchTerra currently. Like they're kind of broken when it comes to senses. The odds of ever sneaking up on one are like the odds of sneaking up on Daredevil. It's probably not happening. T-Rexes near coastal areas might encounter Dilophodons, which are smaller than Tyrannosaurus rex, but far more effective in the water. Essentially like what would happen if you mixed a Dilophosaurus with a Plesiosaurus and made its claws littler. They're smaller than a T-Rex, so I could see a T-Rex winning a fight on land fairly easily, but in the water, these things would simply outclass a Tyrannosaurus rex. So when it comes to competition, they're not the worst competition, but it could be annoying if a T-Rex is trying to hunt things in the water when you have these things kind of just walking around. They're also somewhat humanoid and have thumbs like apes and pretty ape-like arms, so they probably hit pretty hard too. And might even pull a Indominus 2.0 and find a sharpened metal pole just conveniently lying around somewhere. There's also Magantyrosaurus, which is another larger than Tyrannosaurus rex theropod with far better armor and elemental attacks. These things have lightning, fire, and acid, and ice. Yeah, they're kind of like the wizard rex of the verse. And they have a sharp tail, maybe inspired by something from Monster Hunter. I don't know. I didn't copy them. They copied me, trust me, bro. Anyway, yeah, no, they would destroy Rex in the fight. Thankfully, these things are remarkably smart and calm and don't actively attack things smaller to them because they don't care. Like, they're almost as smart as humans, just less violent. So, the odds of them actually attacking Tyrannosaurus rex for no reason are like 0 unless they're starving. But if a T-Rex is actively messing up their food source, they might just blast one into oblivion with essentially like a Harry Potter spell. So, just don't make the sword-tailed Archmage wizard angry. There's also Osmotritus mala, a usually scavenger theropod. In a fight, due to their weird skull shape, it's possible a Rex could beat one, but the Rex is still the smaller of the two, with these things getting near 20 tons. So the only way a Rex wins is if it gets a really good bite on the neck very fast into a fight. But usually a Rex is going to be scared by the weird deformed looking thing staring at it. Thankfully, these things are scavengers, despite being larger than a lot of predators, and tend to actually not even eat full-on corpses, actively going after skeletons because, well, their name literally means bone-crushing jaw, so yeah, that's kind of their thing. So usually they're going to leave Rexes alone, and their only competition to Rexes that are preferring to be scavengers, which Rexes will probably have to resort to here quite a bit. So while they can be competition, these things aren't actually that aggressive for massive theropods. So unless a Rex tries to walk up to one eating and steal its kill, or if it tries to steal a Tyrannosaurus Rex's, well, not its kill, but its food, if it tries to steal a Tyrannosaurus Rex's food, or something like that, they're usually not going to fight. If they just see each other in the woods, a Rex might try to fight one if it's a real dumb Rex that doesn't understand how size works. But these things aren't that territorial at all, and actively just avoid R-Rexes, and even K-Rexes in canon. K-Rexes will actually leave these things alone because they aren't worth eating. They're not big enough for a K-Rex. I mean, they're big enough for a K-Rex to care, but it's not worth the trouble of eating these things because these things aren't actually worth attacking. They're carnivores, not herbivores. They aren't very effective prey, and the K-Rexes kind of know these things are kind of needed for the ecosystem. K-Rexes are extremely smart, smarter than crows. Actually, nearly as smart as humans, and I think they kind of are as smart as humans to a degree, just they don't make tools. K-Rexes are actually remarkably smart animals, which is another reason why they're going to be kind of broken when they're in the predator tier. Also Amatoragungus donophalos, also referred to as Randy. It's a joke, you wouldn't get it anyway. Randys, as I'm going to refer to them because that scientific name that I made for them doesn't make any sense to try to pronounce fast, is yeah, they're big. They're not big as Rexes though, but they do have iron claws, poisonous bites. Their bites are poisonous because they're saliva, not because they have fangs, which is why it works with a strong bite force, unlike a certain other hybrid I know about. But yeah, no, they're pretty dangerous to deal with, and they have ape-like arms. They're a lot like Indown 2.0, which is not the hybrid I was referring to, by the way. They're like Indown 2.0, but smaller, a lot darker, and with the Shadow of the Hedgehog skin on. But yeah, no, the T-Rex and them would probably be competition, but I don't see them being like super fierce competition. These things are pack hunters and mostly nocturnal, and tend to go after larger prey than what T-Rex would go after, because they can afford to with their amount of members in a pack and their venomous bites. Whereas Rex will go after smaller stuff typically. So if they fought one-on-one, a Rex has a shot at winning, though their spiky armor and massive claws and agility give them a pretty decent edge too. But if it's like a full-on fight between a pack and a Rex, the Rex is kind of cooked, and there's nothing the Rex can do about it. But typically, they're just going to avoid each other. And the same goes for the many type of raptors that aren't the one I mentioned earlier, because the raptors are just like real-life raptors, except these ones we know are in packs, unlike the real-life ones where there's not too much evidence to support they did actually do pack hunting. When it comes to mammalian predators, typically they're not going to be hunting the same stuff Rexes are hunting. They tend to hunt other mammals. So Rexes and them probably don't interact much. The only mammalian predator I could see Tyrannosaurus Rex getting in fights with is if it decides to go to mountain forest, tops of mountains, or woodlands for a way where it starts to get a little colder. Mon suppressors, not something a Rex wants to fight. These things are 16 plus tons on average, larger than a Rex. Quadrupedal, have basically skulls outside their own skulls to protect their heads, and hunt like mammoths the size of the elephants from Lord of the Rings. They're not something a T-Rex wants to fight. And they're also pack hunters, and they can get packs of over 30. They're like a massive problem in ArchTerra, and like one of the most dangerous animals in the verse, consistently, just due to their size, numbers, and the fact some of them get elemental buffs. But that's because elemental buffs are a thing that animals can just kind of get in ArchTerra depending on certain situations. Even a Rex could realistically get one here. I'm ignoring that because everything gets them, so it wouldn't change their survival odds too much. It's also massive aquatic predators, massive lizards, massive everything pretty much that the Rex could encounter, but probably wouldn't because they live in different biomes that aren't the forest. There's also dirt devils, which are like crazy little graboid worm things. A Rex would beat one above ground, but if they pop up under a Rex, it could end differently. Thankfully, they're quite rare and rarely attack predators, preferring to hunt herbivores. And there is a bunch of other competition I could go in depth on, but overall, most competition outclasses the Rex, and the Rex doesn't beat a lot of competition. So when it comes to competition, they have a lot of it, and it doesn't look too good for Tyrannosaurus Rex here. So they get a score out of like 2 out of 10 at best. Now to predators. And the first one, the one I've been hyping up this entire time, is the Kaisersaurus Rex, or K-Rex. These things obliterate T-Rex, and that should be kind of obvious, because they obliterate our Rex, which already obliterated T-Rex pretty much. So, why do they do that? A couple reasons. One is size, being 30 feet at the hip, 84 feet long, and over 45 tons, metric tons, on average. On average. Some get larger, some are a little bit smaller. But regardless, they dwarf a Tyrannosaurus Rex pretty bad. They dwarf an R-Rex pretty bad, and an R-Rex already kind of dwarfs a T-Rex. Just like an R-Rex, they have feathers, which actually help protect them, and they're actually fire-resistant canonically, meaning these things can take blasts from razor wings, essentially dragons that aren't actually dragons, kind of like the Rathalos of the series in a way, just a lot bigger. Not quite as strong if I'm going to go into power scaling, but I'm not going to do that here. Actually, they might be as strong. I'll save that for another video or something. Regardless, yeah, these things are fire. These things have fireproof mega feathers that are also resistant to slashing damage and are imbued with actual metal. That's why they're red, blood red. They're not imbued with iron, though. They're imbued with metals that are unique to ArchTerra that are stronger than tungsten, while also being more flexible than steel. Does that make sense in real life? No. Would these feathers be super heavy? Probably. Yeah. Does it matter because it's a fictional series? Not really, because it's a fictional series. Regardless, yeah, no, these things are kind of crazy. Thankfully, they don't breathe fire or anything, unlike a couple other creatures in this verse. Though I was originally going to have them do that, I'm decided to give that to the Basilisk Rex, which will be in another project I'm doing. It will be a lot closer to T-Rex and also a lot more realistic in how it is as an animal. Yeah, I know fire breath and realistic shouldn't really go together, but I'm going to make the fire breath realistically possible under bioengineering standards. Biologically possible, not evolutionary possible. Yeah, I know nothing would evolve to have fire breath most likely. This thing was engineered to have it. It's kind of like Jurassic Park, but like kind of based on modern gene editing. Regardless, you know, K-Rex smokes Tyrannosaurus Rex, hunts stuff that I just said T-Rex couldn't hunt, like those massive ceratopsians. They usually avoid them, but I mean, they can hunt them, and that should say all you need to know. They'll even hunt sauropods. There's a reason normal-sized sauropods, like sauropods you see in real life, the sizes like that, tend to stay far away from the, like, thicker and interior parts of the forest. It's because K-Rexes. It's the reason why R-Rexes tend to stay out of there too. It's because K-Rexes, they run the forest. They are, in most areas, the apex predator. Though there are things a lot stronger than in the forest, these are by far and away the most dominant species in any given area. And they're stealthy too, despite being massive. And they have senses better than a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Like, they're just Rexes on roids, and that's about it. So yeah, no, Tyrannosaurus Rex would avoid them completely. There's also Gigantus mantis, a sauropod-sized mantis theropod monster thing made by a friend of mine that is also canonically part of the verse. I don't think I have to explain why a theropod-sized mantis T-Rex thing would be a problem for Tyrannosaurus Rex in a fight. Thankfully, these things hunt larger prey than T-Rex on average, so the odds of it actively seeking Tyrannosaurus Rex out as prey are about the same as a T-Rex deciding to start eating hedgehogs. It's not something that would most likely happen, but if it did happen, the T-Rex is kind of screwed. Unfortunately, I can't go in depth on the many mega theropods that would smoke a Tyrannosaurus Rex throughout here, because I've already went in depth on a lot of them. But there are a lot more of them that would smoke a Tyrannosaurus Rex and could potentially be a predator of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Thankfully, they have larger, easier to hunt prey that doesn't actively, like, make them have to kill a smaller, weaker, less nutritious, less meaty carnivore. So, like, they're going to be hunting stuff that isn't T-Rex typically. But Tyrannosaurus Rex is far from the apex predator here, and that's definitely a change of pace it isn't ready for, usually. So, off that, yeah, Tyrannosaurus Rex has a lot of predators. Also, that hybrid trio I made, yeah, they're all here too, and needless to say, they would all beat a Rex in a fight and be major competition for them. With Ombreodons actively seeking out predators to kill them and over prey because they like killing stuff, they're just weird like that. Timatosaurus is so large as an adult that, like, there's no point in a Rex even attempting to fight one. And Loricodons are similarly massive and also extremely dangerous. So, like, yeah, a Tyrannosaurus Rex is going to have a hard time dealing with any of those three, as well as most larger predators. As well as stuff like the Megadon, also referred to as the Pterodon, or another scientific name I'm not going to pronounce. Yeah, these things are even bigger than K-Rex and actively hunt K-Rexes. Thankfully, they're rare and invasive, and they're the other Devil Joe of the verse I was talking about. They look completely impractical in real life and would be completely impractical in real life, but they're heavily armored super theropod alien things that spit extremely potent acid that can damage dragons outright. So, yeah, kind of a problem. There's also massive armored geovores that can kill K-Rex out there. They wouldn't be a predator of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but they would definitely just blast one on sight for even looking like a K-Rex in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah, there's a lot of problems that a T-Rex would run into in terms of stuff that's so much bigger than it and so much stronger than it that it would be an issue for it to try to survive it. But due to the fact that it could just pull an R-Rex and go to places those things don't live in, it has a slightly higher chance than you'd assume. Meaning it gets a 4 out of 10 in terms of how well it's doing with its predators. So with all that said, how well does T-Rex do in ArchTerra? The answer is, realistically, they'd go extinct fairly quickly. They wouldn't do very well. They have some prey options they could go after, but the competition and predators are just way too much. They'd be way too out of their comfort zone to actually survive. But for this, we're going to assume that by some miracle they do, and that's how we're going to get our evolutions. There are 6 evolutions of Tyrannosaurus Rex that we would get out of these. And these will all be permanently added as new animals to ArchTerra after this video. After this video, I also intend to do longer videos about ArchTerra that go into the lore and stuff like that. So if you're interested in this first after this video, make sure to check those out when they come out. Regardless, time to get into the speculative evolutions of Tyrannosaurus Rex. For the first one, we have the most out there out of them all, and that is Lachosaurus Rex, aka the basically aquatic flavor of Tyrannosaurus Rex. At a size roughly comparable to an R-Rex, so bigger than bigger than any real-life Tyrannosaurus Rex would typically be. They have adapted to a semi-aquatic, well, mostly aquatic lifestyle, having a flipper-like tail, a completely different posture, very strong muscles for the tail and parts of the body that help move the tail. A bite slightly less powerful pound for pound than the Tyrannosaurus Rex had, but better for catching fish, with teeth more similar to that of crocodile than T-Rex now. And a lot of adaptations like webbed feet for swimming. They live in the riverways and coastlines of the forested regions of ArchTerra and are not a dominant but relatively high-tier carnivore for most parts of it, sometimes venturing to reefs where they get competition with larger aquatic predators. They do now travel in family units typically and are more social. Most of their senses are just as strong, just more adapted for the water, with their sense of smell being very similar to that of a shark. Their nostrils have also changed to be more crocodile-like to aid them in actually being effective ambush predators as well when near the coast or side of rivers. And overall, they are definitely not the biggest Tyrannosaurus Rex speculative evolution or the most dangerous one, but they're one of the most successful. Just because they fill a niche that a lot of predators don't have, and outside competition with Spinosaurids, they don't really have much threats. Next, we have Umbrasaurus Rex. This version of Tyrannosaurus Rex has went to some of the underworld biomes, as well as sometimes staying in denser parts of the forest, but being mostly nocturnal. They specialize at stealth, having even better padded feet, sharper claws, slightly longer arms, a bite force just as strong as the original Tyrannosaurus Rex. Their size hasn't changed too much, but they have developed very dark, very good for camouflage black feathers and really dark skin to basically just make them invisible in the night. Their eyes have been more adapted for nighttime than even the original Tyrannosaurus Rex, and all their senses are boosted even further than they already were. The feathers are also specially designed to not make them overheat even when it's like super hot out in tropical forest, as although they absorb a lot of sunlight, they're extremely thin and not like they don't really heat, they don't keep heat in, they just absorb sunlight. And again, they're also nocturnal, so they're typically not even out when it's warm. So these guys are kind of in the same niche as some of the more nocturnal carnivores I covered, and they have direct competition with them. But overall, they do fine, and they do better than the real-life Tyrannosaurus Rex would do in ArchTerra, just because they're more specialized for ArchTerra and are even more stealth-based than the original. Next, with Regiumsaurus Rex, a Tyrannosaurus Rex speculative evolution that relies heavily on the not totally bound by the rules of reality biologies of ArchTerra creatures, and has reached colossal sizes at around 100 feet long and at least 40 feet at the hip. These guys are larger than even K-Rex. And though extremely rare, very solitary and very territorial, they can take on adult Kaisersaurus Rexes as well, and typically actually win in fights between the two. Though K-Rex is still considered the more dominant predator because it's more common, these massive royal tyrannosaurs are no joke. They're one of the few animals that will take on a Megalodon, not Megalodon, the shark, the massive alien devil Joe monster. They're one of the few creatures that will take one of them on and actually hold its own for the most part, though they're still obviously weak to the super acid, but you know. They have developed large, like, golden crowns on their heads that's used as this a display structure. Males have more elaborate ones with other colors mixed in and are typically just slightly smaller than females. That size is more comparable to that of a above average Kaisersaurus rex, whereas females are just blatantly larger than that. But overall, they are an extremely dominant predator that is essentially like just a T-Rex on roids. And they are a pretty dominant creature in ArchTerra's ecosystems, which is made even better because they can live in many biomes, as they don't really have a limit to where they can live outside like hyper snowy places. So wastelands, forest, anywhere where they have access to prey and there's not dragons or like massively overpowered threats, they tend to be. Next we have Slivosaurus venator, which is essentially T-Rex but smaller with antlers, at around 25 feet long, roughly 10 feet at the hip, and having large antlers on their heads, both males and females, with females being a little bit larger than the males, and males having brightly colored antlers in comparison to the females, more dull, brownish, and grayish antlers. This species of Tyrannosaurid is actually pretty successful. Not only can they use their horns in territorial disputes with each other, as they travel in packs now, they're pack hunters in packs of 5, typically a family unit, much like wolves. They also can use them pretty effectively against smaller prey. Their bite is still just as deadly for their body size as a Tyrannosaurus bite should be. Their claws and arms are a little bit longer, which gives them some ability to grasp prey and claw at prey, but it's not like their main weapon. And they are significantly faster than their larger counterparts were. Due to how they hunt, they're relatively effective predators in the forest, usually targeting smaller prey or sometimes larger hadrosaurs, but rarely. And they do pretty fine, as there isn't much competition for pack hunters in the forest, with there only being a couple species of raptor, like the Mercury raptor, that they really have to worry about. And not all raptors in ArchTerra are pack hunters, much like in real life, where most of them probably weren't. Though there definitely are pack hunting dromaeosaurs, like dinosaurs out there in ArchTerra, this creature doesn't have to worry about them. Overall, they are the most successful overall of the Tyrannosaurus spec evolutions and have the largest population. So yeah, that video was pretty long. If you stick for the whole thing, you're insane, but thank you. And this is the first major ArchTerra thing I've done outside the announcement video, I believe. So yeah, this is going to keep going. I'll try to shorten them by a lot next time I do something like this. But yeah, if you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. I'm going to have the biome contest for ArchTerra here really soon. So if you're interested in that, I guess get ready. And I'll see you guys next one. Bye.